Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. And today I have for you my November wrap-up. Actually, just part of my November wrap-up because I've decided to split this video into two videos so that I can talk about the works of fiction separately from the works of nonfiction that I read in November, because it was nonfiction November and I did end up participating in it and kind of just embracing it wholeheartedly. So I want to talk about all of these books. And I tend to be a little bit long-winded, so I think splitting it up into two is going to be the best option for me. So I will go ahead and get started with the first work of fiction that I finished in November, and that was Memory in Death by J.D. Robb or Nora Roberts. This is part of the In-Depth series, which I really have been enjoying reading. This one in particular was just a standout for me because it is digging back a little bit more into Eve Dallas's background. If you're not familiar with the In-Depth series, it's a kind of sort of futuristic detective series where you follow a police detective in New York in the near future. She is married to one of the wealthiest men in the universe, and there is a really interesting cast of characters that kind of become her found family. The cases tend to be really interesting. Some installments are better than others, and for me this was kind of one of the better ones in that it got me really interested in it. These books tend to be kind of my comfort food in that I just read them for pure enjoyment. Usually before bed, usually on my tablet actually, so this kind of stood out as being one of the books that I have found in a hard copy at a used bookstore. Usually like I'll check the mystery section of a used bookstore when I walk into one, and if I find a book that is coming up real soon in the In-Depth series, I might pick it up. So this was real fun, really enjoyed it, and I will definitely be continuing the In-Depth series. The next book of fiction that I finished in November was Anne Rice's Memnoch the Devil. Alright, this is my first Anne Rice book, and I picked it up because a student was reading it. If you don't follow me on Instagram, that's where I've talked about, where I talk a little bit more about my work. I'm a professor, and this semester I taught a class about the history of emotions. And one of the assignments was for students to read a work of romance, a romance novel, and then connect it to the history of love that we've been talking about all semester. So one of these students wanted to do this book. I allowed it to happen, even though it's really, I wouldn't classify it as a romance novel, but it's by Anne Rice, so I allowed it. This is number 5 in the Vampire Chronicles, so I definitely started out of order, and this is really a theological discussion between the devil and Lyssa, who is the main vampire you follow through the series. I really enjoyed the parts of like Lyssa exploring kind of his place in the universe, his place in the world. I love when you start off the story, he's following this mobster and his daughter. I enjoyed those aspects of it. For me, the theology or the theological discussion here didn't really work. Like, I wasn't that interested in it. The student that used this book though loved it. And so I would say if you're interested in theological discussions and then like a different spin on the relationship between God and the devil, I think this is a cool one. It also, for me, because it was the first Anne Rice book I read, introduced me to like how odd she can be, which I, since talking to people, have found that this is a staple in her writing. But I'm going to spoil one scene because it just caught me so off guard, and I feel like I'm not the only one who should have this scene in their head. So in the story, kind of the main female human we're following is Nora, and she is kind of she wants to like start her own religion essentially. And when at the very end, when Memnoch kind of comes back from his theological travels, he is in need of blood, and Nora is menstruating. He doesn't want to hurt her by like sucking her blood, so he decides that he's going to take her menstrual blood. and he sucks all of the menstrual blood out of her. And at first I thought, like, I'm not queasy about menstruation in books. I actually welcome when authors talk about it. And I thought, okay, like a lot of vampire, like, you know, bites are kind of metaphors for sex anyway. So I was like, okay, is this a scene, a metaphor for oral sex? And I decided it can't be, because there wasn't a whole lot of pleasure taken. So maybe it is a metaphor for certain kinds of oral sex experiences. It was a weird scene. Weird scene. But you know, I'm never going to forget this book because of this scene. So there's that. The next book that I finished in November was 5 Midnights by Dávila Cardinal. This is a YA horror set in Puerto Rico with Puerto Rican mythologies, right? I really enjoyed this, and I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it because although I have nothing against horror, I just haven't read horror in a while, and I was reading it before bed, and I was a little bit scared that it was going to be too scary, but it really was not. It really functions more as a thriller than a horror, but you do have kind of the equivalent of what in Mexico we call el cucuy. In Puerto Rico, I learned that it is not el cucuy. Instead, he is called el cuco. So Puerto Rico is el cuco, and it's just, you know, this like scary devil-like character that's used to scare kids into like doing their chores. This book takes on the premise of like, what if he's real, and like is following this group of friends that all grew up together because they're all born around the same time. Their moms formed what was like a children's group together, and they all became really good friends. Now a lot of them have ended up like involved in drugs and violence, and El Cuco's going around killing them, the ones that are bad. And at the same time, we're following a female character who is Puerto Rican American. She's visiting the island. Her uncle is like the chief of police, and she is noticing the pattern of these murders, and she's trying to figure out what is happening. Really good book. I really enjoyed it. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I like thrillers, so this ended up just hitting the right spots for me. So if you're into kind of YA thrillers, I think this is a really good one. And like I enjoyed the like cucuy kind of aspects of it. All right, the next book that next work of fiction that I finished in November was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I finally understand all the love for Christina Lauren. I have come late to Christina Lauren mostly because it's not until like the last few years that I have been into more contemporary romances. And I have to say that the 2 books that I've read from her before, like they were fine, but there was something in the book and the story that I didn't like. So while the book might have overall worked for me, there was something in there that was real turn off. And this was a book that I can just unequivocally like recommend. This is good. It hit all the right notes for me, and I understand the hype. Like one of the things that Christina Lauren are really good at doing is kind of like witty, like comedy, and like good pacing. And I did feel like this highlighted a lot of the best in their writing. This was a huge book in 2019 in the romance world. So if you somehow missed the premise of this, the book begins at a wedding, and the best man and the maid of honor hate each other. Their siblings are getting married though, so they have to kind of endure each other's company for this wedding. Well, it turns out the buffet had some sort of parasite, some sort of thing that made everybody get sick except for the best man and the maid of honor, who now have to go on their siblings' honeymoon so that the honeymoon isn't wasted. Really enjoyed it. It turns out I really like the hate to love trope. I really like that the main character is Latina, although I have to say that my one criticism of this book is that after reading a lot of own voices books, it really stood out to me as not being own voices. I can really tell the difference. It didn't take away from my enjoyment of this book at all, though, but I don't recommend picking this up if you are looking for an own voice or for a Latinx character in your romance novel. Like, I would point you much more to an own voices book rather than to this if that's what you're looking for in your romance. If that is not necessarily something you're particularly looking for, then this is fine. It has, that kind of diversity in it. It's just not as authentic and as like, you can just tell that it's coming from an outsider's perspective. That's it. There wasn't anything harmful, anything bad in it. It's just was coming from an outsider's perspective. But yeah, I really enjoy Ethan and Olive, both characters. Olive, along with being Latinx, is also in STEM, but she is considering kind of a change in careers. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. It's a fun, just real nice book. So if you're looking for a light-hearted romantic comedy, I think this is a good one. All right. The second to last work of fiction that I finished in November was Binti, the complete trilogy. So it does have some pacing issues in that the last third of the book does feel like a very different, it has a very different tone and feel than the first 2/3 of the book, and so it ends up feeling like a disjointed story at the end there. But I really liked each section of it individually, and loved aspects of it. So overall, I am so happy that I read the trilogy, and thank you for my sister for making me pick it back up. If you have this in your TBR, I would really recommend you pick it up. To me, the story of Binti really speaks at an intellectual level. I love analyzing all the different layers here because one of the themes I connect the most to is that sense of occupying an in-between space between cultures where, you've left your home, your culture for an intellectual space where you don't fully belong and where you might be seen as backwards, but where you also thrive and excel. And then coming back home and feeling like you've changed and you might not fully belong back home either, and feeling a huge sense of loss because of that. And I love just unpacking all of that. And I do plan on rereading the entire series at some point because it just spoke to me so profoundly. So yeah, really, really enjoyed it. And then the last book that I finished in November was the Bronance Bookclub by Lyssa K. Adams. Another one of those books that has been quite hyped when it came out. It has a really kind of fun premise. It's a romance book club for men. Where they're reading romances as a way of better connecting with the women in their lives and better understanding them. When you begin the story, you have a central couple who is estranged from one another. They are married and now they are estranged. You are getting the point of view from the husband who knows what went wrong. He is a ball player. The marriage was a very whirlwind romance where she got pregnant and then he proposed, and all of a sudden they get caught up in a situation that they weren't fully in control of because of his baseball schedule, and the conflict now has just reached its head, and it's a very solvable problems, but they're problems that they both need to work on together, and I just really enjoy that. I am finding that at this point in my life, I really am enjoying seeing couples face real issues, solvable issues, and working on them together. I love that. And this couple still had a lot of chemistry and physical and emotional chemistry, and it just really worked for me. It's a fun reading experience. It was 4 out of 5 stars for me, I believe, because I found it to be just a great example of like a romance that has comedy and heart in it, and just very, very lovely. So I really enjoyed it, and do recommend it. So if you have read any of the books that I've been talking about, let me know down below. If you disagree on my take on it, let me know down below, because that is one of the things that I love the most about this community, is that we can all read the same book and just like connect to it in different ways and have different takes on it, and sometimes disagree on them as well. So if you disagreed with my take on any of these, let me know down below. If you agreed, for sure, let me know down below. Or if you plan on picking any of these up, I would love to know. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.